Restaurants are really simple on paper. They're just hard to run because they involve people.
Jay-Z, direct the camera, take one.
QSR, I think, is a wonderful place to be, in my opinion. The modern day version of an auto plant or a steel factory. We have a lot of people coming in as their first jobs, but what we can offer them is a career. Happiness and satisfaction in any job isn't driven by monetary rewards, isn't driven by a title. It's driven by three things and in a specific order: mastery, autonomy, and purpose. It's called learning and development for a reason. So oftentimes we find when people deliver training, they're focusing on the learning part. That's often where everybody stops. What's hard is the next piece. The next piece is the development. We close your eyes in a restaurant. If you hear the team talking, the team laughing, calling out orders, you hear new customers coming in, that's got a great culture. You walk into a restaurant and close your eyes and you hear nothing but silence, that restaurant's in trouble. Speed of service is paramount. The problem is that speed is only one component of a guest experience. You can be too fast. Nobody wakes up and walks in their job and says, I'm gonna screw everything up and sabotage this. But under stress, you can make mistakes. So I hear this all the time.
Yeah.
I will encounter restaurant general managers that say, I'm so busy, time to train and develop people. People who say I don't have time for training are in that position because they are not training. You didn't develop the people, you didn't train the people. That's on you.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Leaders in Learning. I'm your host, Shauna David, and today I'm sitting down with Jay-Z. Not that Jay-Z. This Jay-Z is not the king of hip hop. He's the king of corporate training and quick serve restaurants. Over the past decade, Jay-Z has shaped training programs for iconic brands like Wendy's, Whataburger, and more recently, within Restaurant Brands International, owners of Tim Hortons, Popeyes, Firehouse Subs, and Burger King. His holistic and innovative approach to training has not only optimized processes, but also contributed significantly to the career growth and development of employees and franchise owners. So what's the secret to his success? Let's find out. Jay-Z, thank you again for being here.
Absolutely, my pleasure.
I want to start with your background. You've had an extensive career in learning and development, and so tell me, how'd you get here?
Wow, that's a loaded question. And I'm actually formally trained in political science. So I have my PhD from The Ohio State University.
Congratulations.
Thank you. International Relations and Political Psychology. Well, what's that mean? That means for my whole life, I've been interested in trying to figure out, how do people think? And how, when they think, how do they convert information into behavior? How do people act in groups? How does personality impact that? How do organizations work with people? So right out of getting my degree, I started working internationally, trying to build a global education network, and did that for a number of years and found my way into corporate training. And I eventually found my way into QSR and fell in love with it. QSR is just quick service restaurants, for those that may not know. Yeah. So QSR, I think, is a wonderful place to be, in my opinion.
Right.
It is similar to, it's a modern day version of an auto plant or a steel factory. You have a lot of people coming in as their first jobs,
right?
And they're really going there maybe in high school or college to just earn a little bit of pocket money.
Right.
But what we can offer them is a career. And what you find is in QSR, when you're in any room in any brand, and you ask how many people were the leaders in that room, did you start as a team member, maybe on the broiler or the fryer? 80% of the hands go up. So it's a place where we can help people achieve their dreams. We can help through learning and development, give them a career path that helps them change their life, change their status, change what they can do going forward. And that's a fantastic place to be.
How do you go from a frontline, quick service restaurant employee to a leader, to a franchise owner? And what I want to poke at a little bit is the value of that frontline manager training. So now someone's in a role and you're equipping them with all of these skills. What does that journey look like to be able to transition them with the soft skills they need? How do you go about making that stick with them? It's
not always easy, right? And I think the transition that we made as an industry to learning and development was very important. And words have meaning, and we should always call that out. So it's called learning and development for a reason. So oftentimes we find when people deliver training, they're focusing on the learning part, right? Yeah. We're giving them a job aid, we're giving them a course, we're giving them a video, we're giving them an e-learning. That's the learning part. So to change your behavior and develop a career, you have to get new information. I'm not saying it's not important, but that's often where everybody stops. What's hard is the next piece. The next piece is the development that you're talking about. And development literally means you have to practice, you have to fail, You have to get coached. You have to get assessed. You have to practice. You have to coach, fail. And it's a cycle that you do over and over and over until you reach proficiency and you become certified. That circle can take at different times for different people. And it's really hard because you have to stay on top of it. And that's where a lot of our systems fail. Because we're trying to do so much, we run from fire to fire, and we don't sit and make sure that development takes hold and that they master it. And so if we're doing our job, we build the systems that help in those soft skill areas in leadership to make sure they become habitual behaviors. And that's what helps people.
What tricks or tips do you have for somebody, for a L&D practitioner who is looking to move from the learning objective, achieving a learning objective, to achieving a performance outcome, which is what you're describing as it relates to development and building a set of skills and behaviors? How do you start if you've never done that before?
Well, I think first of all, you have to really stop and think about that challenge you just posed. Right? How do I convert information into behavior? You have to understand the science behind it. We've learned so much in cognitive science over the last 20 years. We're beginning to apply more of that in our learning and development systems, but we need to do much more. So we really need to get people to understand how the brain works and how we convert that into repeatable behavior. How do people learn? Then how do they master, and how do they convert the behavior? So part of that, if you're early in your learning and development career, is get out and learn the science, right? So there are plenty of books, plenty of resources. A great one is But Made to Stick, The Science of Learning. Really goes through and talks about the different myths that we have and the way we design training. Here's a great example. This is a fantastic example. It's called the myth of massed practice. They did an experiment with a baseball team, and what they did was they divided the baseball team in half, and they said half of you will take batting practice the traditional way, half of you will take batting practice a new way. The new way was they told the pitcher, just throw whatever you want, like in a baseball game. For those that don't know, traditional batting practice is throw 20 fastballs, throw 20 curveballs, throw 20 sliders, throw 20 changeups. So the batter is learning those pitches. Now, when they put this into play, the people doing traditional initially self-rated themselves as hitters and said, we're really good. We're picking this up. We love this. Like, we're great hitters. And the other people said, we're terrible hitters. We don't know what's coming. We can't bat. We're terrible. But as they went across the season, the people who were doing the new way actually performed better and rated better. Why? Because they were practicing like an actual game. So they were seeing and trying to decide pitches. Well, Jay-Z, that's great, but that's baseball. What does that have to do with QSR, right?
There's a simulation, right?
It's really important, right? So now let's go to mathematics. How do most kids learn mathematics in grade school? We do a week of addition, then subtraction, then multiplication, then division, then the unit test comes what? And it's all jumbled up and they go, I don't know what to do. All right, well, Jay-Z, what's that have to do with restaurants? Most places are making different products, sandwiches, different types of burgers. You know how we teach it? Practice 20 hamburgers, practice 20 chicken sandwiches, practice 20 wraps. Nobody comes in and orders that way. So we have to learn. The point here is that the long-winded story to say we have to take the science of what we know, how people learn, and apply it. So back to your original question is new people in the field need to understand the science of learning and begin to figure out how to build systems, tools, and processes that lead people from learning to behavioral change. That's the key. Understand your recipe and use your recipe over and over.
Such a great analogy. And again, like, you can start with the science. Let's talk a bit more about behaviors. You've got a very interesting perspective on the speed versus friendly approach to quick service restaurants. Can you give us an example or an antidote of a time when your method made a significant difference in either the lives of the teams or the business at large?
What we really need to be in learning development is, and there's a lot of literature and there's a big movement going in this direction. We need to stop being order takers. We need to start being strategic players at the table. How do you get there? Easy to say, everybody aspires to it. How do you get there? But every L&D organization really needs to consider that and figure out how to get the strategic seat at the table instead of being order takers. Personally, I call that the training treadmill. When people come and say, we need training, you just keep spitting out training. So there's lots of good training often in L&D organizations, but it's not packaged into systems, into systems that help strategically advance the business. So what we learned is we were looking at our business, and in our business, QSR, obviously, quick service restaurants, speed of service is paramount. Everybody says, speed of service, speed of service. Let's focus on speed of service. And we measure, it's very easy to measure. We know when a car pulls up, we know when they hit the window, we know when we fulfill it. So we have data everywhere. It's very objective. The problem is that speed is only one component of a guest experience. The other is friendliness, hospitality, and you have to have the right blend. And when we put all the weight on speed of service, we actually end up doing behaviors that hurt the guest experience. You can be too fast. You can be too fast in that you're trying to do things really quick for the guest, and they feel like they're just a number, right? Human beings don't measure time. But we are trying to push the restaurant to do that. Instead, if we are friendly and memorable, then they're okay with whatever speed within reason, right? You can't take 20 minutes at a QSR.
Right.
You can't really even take 7 or 8. But it doesn't matter if you're 2 or 3 minutes up to 5 minutes. We actually did the analysis that people will return if you're friendly all the way up and beyond 8 or 9 minutes of waiting in a line because it was a memorable service and their mind told them it was a good experience and it wasn't a bad one.
So a positive experience at 8 minutes will outweigh a negative experience, at like 120 seconds.
Absolutely.
There's something you talked to me about, and this I believe deeply, it's a part of the HBI framework, but it's like what you measure is going to get attention. And in this case, it sounds like the core like KPI, the core thing that's success is the indicator is speed.
Yep.
Should people be looking at a different indicator?
I think that we need to create an indicator that accounts for speed or urgency and friendliness. So what we want is a good experience that was timely.
Right.
Now, that means creating a KPI. And in an industry where those are set, we have our work cut out for us.
Right.
But look, these are business people. And if you are able to use the data to show if we do X, Y happens, they're going to gravitate to that no matter what the original KPI is. So what we try to coach our people is stop managing by indicator and manage by behavior. Walk in and say, hey, let's pull the speed of service report, set it on the table, and together, let's look at it and say, what do you see? Well, I wonder how we got there. Let's talk about how we got there. And you work through that way and think about what behaviors do we need to have in place that will lead to an indicator that's different or more desirable.
So it's about pulling back the proverbial curtain, not looking at the data on the spreadsheet, but looking at the steps and the behaviors. To your point around habits and practice earlier, what are those habits that led to the behavior?
Exactly. Now, we're seeing in learning and development, right, and anywhere else, big data, right? We're collecting so much data. Part of the problem is there's so much data. It's all unstructured. So what we have to do is it's not that the data is not important, and that's a really hard thing to drive home. We never said speed of service isn't important. We said we're looking at it the wrong way and emphasizing the wrong parts.
It goes back to your baseball analogy, right? Like being able to measure the reality of a restaurant, layering the human touch, because if you just measure for speed, you're going to lose all of that guest experience you talked about.
Exactly. But when you manage by indicator, listen, humans are wired in such a way that if you go and beat someone over the head with an indicator, they'll get you the number. Anyway, they'll get you the number. And oftentimes, they get you the number in the wrong way. They do behaviors that actually hurt the restaurant because you emphasize the number. So what we're arguing is, let's still look at data, but let's figure out what behaviors will lead to the indicators that we want. And that's a big change for a system.
But it's also pretty normal for human life, right? Any parent with kids out there, it really is about what behaviors and habits are you instituting. When I think about the work that you've done in quick service restaurant, there's 3 E's come up to me. The interactive approach that you're thinking about in your fast food chain restaurants, combining education, experience, and expertise. So I wonder if you could share a bit more about how that 3E model.
Yeah, it's actually funny. That 3E model came from the 70-20-10 model that everybody talks about 70-20-10, right?
Yes, they do.
But 70-20-10, there's a lot of misunderstandings around it. But my understanding, after quite a bit of reading, is that 70-20-10 model emerged when they went and asked 100 people, what is your favorite way or your most memorable way to learn? 70% said, well, I learn by hands-on. 20% said, well, I learn by coaching. And another 10% said, I learn by information. Well, that ended up going to a place as learning and development specialists where we started saying, you got to have 70% of the learning has to be hands-on activities. 20% has to be coaching. And well, that's wrong. That's not what that study said. No. But the conclusion I drew from that is instead of thinking of it in 70-20-10, what you have to incorporate are what I call 3 E's. You have to incorporate all 3 flavors in every learning and development intervention. So the 3 E's, education, you have to give people new information. If you're not giving them new information, they already knew it, they're just not doing it.
Yeah.
So
that's a different problem.
That's a different problem.
Right.
We have to give people new information to be able to change their behavior. Now, the next stage is what we call experience. I need to go practice that, right?
Yeah.
I can go practice. The third E is expertise. That's coaching. Now, I have golfed for 30 years and I'm terrible at it.
Are you?
But I love it. I just love to get out and walk on golf courses because they're beautiful. It's like a walk in an extraordinary park.
Spoil the bad
But I'm
walk.
terrible. Yes, exactly. A good walk spoiled. Very nice reference. So I'm terrible at it. But it's because I go out and I golf and I learn the information and then I just go out on my own. I could have accelerated my development by having somebody who is an expert, a coach, help me learn what I'm doing well and what I'm not.
Right.
So in any intervention we build, we think of those 3 E's and they have to be there. You have to have new information.
Okay.
Then you have to have opportunity to practice, which is experience.
Yes.
Then you have to have coaching. They can get better on their own, but it takes forever. If you have a coach, you can accelerate, which is what we really want. We want to accelerate their development. So make sure there are coaching resources that help them in that practice to get better, leading to behavioral certification. So the 3 E's have to be in everything. And don't worry about 70%, 20%, 10%. Worry about make sure they're all in there in a system so people can develop the way you want them to. We have moved away from ADDIE development to action mapping, but it's the same idea. It's start with the KPI. The first question we ask anybody that says, hey, we need training is, okay, here's the question. In 6 months, how are you going to know we're successful? How will you define success? And it has to be by a KPI. Yeah. So you start with the KPI and say, this is what we're trying to do. Increase sales by 5%, lower speed of service, decrease speed of service by 10 seconds, whatever it is, find your KPI. Then according to Kathy Moore's action mapping process, design process, it's once you have the KPI, figure out what behaviors in what roles will move that KPI. Once you know those behaviors, design practice activities that will make those behaviors habitual. Then when you have the practice activities, start and say, well, what do I have to teach them? Education,
right?
See it all falling in place again from a design perspective. What do I have to teach somebody so they can practice over and over and over again until it becomes habitual and drives that KPI?
One of the things that behaviors is connected to deeply is this culture. And
Absolutely.
what is culture, right?
Absolutely.
People have a hard time framing it, wrapping it. It feels ambiguous, but in my time kind of building cultures in different organizations, what I have found to be true is that it's really simple. It really is just a collection of behaviors. It is the things that we celebrate, who and how we celebrate, the things that we don't tolerate, who we hire, who we fire. And I have always heard this line, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Is that true? Do you think culture really is king, queen, whatever?
Yeah, culture is essential. And the easiest way to think of it is in the same way you just talked about the behaviors, what we celebrate. The easiest way that I like to talk about it, tell people is culture is what happens when nobody's looking.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So you know your culture's there if those behaviors are happening when nobody is measuring or the big wigs aren't in there looking.
Right.
That's culture. So you can recognize a great culture in a QSR restaurant. Just step through the door and step off to the side so you don't get in the way of the people coming inside the door. Just close your eyes. We close your eyes in a restaurant. If you hear the team talking, the team laughing, calling out orders, you hear new customers coming in, that's got a great culture. You walk into a restaurant and close your eyes and you hear nothing but silence, that restaurant's in trouble. It doesn't have a great culture. So culture absolutely can drive and elevate how a restaurant performs. The challenge, of course, is how do you build that culture? How do you make sure that you have the systems in place to reinforce all of those things? And what I found is, across my journey, is people like to jump to culture.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to go build a culture.
Yeah.
Well, listen, that's like saying I want to put the roof on my house before I built the foundation and the walls. Go ahead and give it a shot. But then, and you can probably build it, but it's going to be laying there on the ground. It's not really going to be a roof.
Yeah.
So just be careful how you think about culture. It's very important. But I think in our industry, the way we think about it is, I was at an organization where an ops partner of mine literally hung out and started whiteboarding. We just went on this riff where, how do we think about a restaurant and how do they get to culture? What has to come first? And we really took as a point of departure, this is crazy because I like to grab stuff from everywhere. We took as a point of departure Maslow's hierarchy of needs for a human, right? We mapped out the restaurant hierarchy of needs.
Okay.
And number one is people. If you don't have the people in place, it doesn't matter. You can't build a culture if you don't have the people.
Right.
So it's people, and then it's equipment that works, and then it's having inventory, then it's having the right atmosphere, and then it's culture. You can try to build culture, but if you don't have the people, it's not going to work.
And so when you talk to restaurant owners who don't see the value of a workplace culture, and they're at the same time, maybe they're having staffing issues. Like what advice would you give? What words of wisdom would you give to that franchisee owner, that person who, that culture is just something?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're running businesses, and we know we can actually show the data that says when you are fully staffed and you have a great culture, you're going to outperform other restaurants. We know that. Yeah. Now, COVID took a big toll on QSR, like many other places. Yeah. We lost a lot of experience. Yeah. It went out the door, has to come back. So there were serious staffing challenges throughout that period. We're just now beginning to recover. But I think what we need to do from a people perspective is the single most important thing you can do is just recognize each person as an individual and have the systems in place that acknowledge where they are and what they want to do in that journey. Some people will use QSR as their first job to help get them pocket money, maybe even help put them through college, but they aspire to do something beyond in a restaurant, and that's okay. We still have a role to play where, as their first job, if we can help them learn what it means to be professional, what it means to be respectful of your teammates, what it means to take accountability for when you do something right, when you do something wrong, we can help them achieve what they want in their career, and we're better for it, right? We helped contribute. So we don't mind if we lose them that way. Yeah. Now, what we hope to do is inspire them so that they stay, that they feel a part of a family within our restaurants, and that they stay. I always tell my team, what I truly aspire to is, I aspire to have everybody recognize that our team members, managers, and RGMs are the very best in the business, and they all try to come and poach them, but none of them leave because they know we care about them. They know we care about their development, and they know that we're here for them as a family. And that's what we're trying to provide. So really essential to build that culture is simply learn to be nice to people, respect people, help them on their journey, is really what it's all about. And look, people will say often, well, Jay-Z, that's great, but what do you want me to do? How do I be nice? Do you want me to hug everyone over? No, look. Listen, there are some simple behaviors that you can do, and we know in our restaurants, the guest experience will never exceed that of the team member, right? So if you
say that one more time, Jay,
the guest experience will never exceed that of the team members, right? And there's a lot of people that know this. It's not my saying, but very important. It's huge to call out. So what you think about is if we're mistreating our people, if we're not giving them a great experience, how can you expect them to give a great guest experience? Yeah. Because they're stressed out, they're angry, they're upset. But if we have a great team member experience, they will deliver that same experience to the guests. So number one is when your team members come in through the door, look them in the eye and smile. Yeah. And the other trick is point your heart at their heart. When you point your heart at somebody else's heart, it makes a connection and it orients you to them. Too often in our world, think about how many times we walk by and we say, hey, welcome, glad you're here, go punch in. Or we're standing at the drive-through window and the guest comes up and we say, hi, welcome to the restaurant, what can I get you today? And we're standing. As soon as if I'm doing this to you at the drive-through, as soon as I orient myself here, doesn't it fundamentally change the connection that we have? Totally. So there are simple things that we can start to coach our people on in order to drive that culture within the team and within the guests.
And these are like super simple behaviors. Yeah. Now, I want to dig in a little bit to some of these systems because as technology has advanced, we tap our phone instead of digital currency. You now have all of these like button things you can order. How have you integrated these digital tools, but still kept the human touch?
Actually, what's interesting is a lot of people are worried about some of those digital tools, like kiosks or like smartphones and apps. What's interesting is those tools actually streamline the ordering process and help you with accuracy because the guests themselves are plugging it in. Right. And that actually allows us to focus more on the hospitality end of it so that when you arrive, we can make sure that we're greeting you in a way that acknowledges you, that we have your food that's ready and that it's hot food's hot, cold food's cold, and that we thank you for coming into our restaurant and that we ask you to come back again. So the technology actually allows us to give higher touch with our labor. So we don't have to then worry about positioning people at cash registers or keying orders in or asking over and over again, I'm sorry, what was that? I didn't get, some of those drive-through speakers. So we can actually optimize the labor. And while people think it will lead to cutting labor, it absolutely does not. It allows us to put that labor in a place that matters to our guests and elevates the touch that we can put around it. So you can also think that there's a segment of people that will come in and easily use a kiosk, right?
Yeah.
And then there are people that aren't used to it. All right. So if you're not used to it and you walk in and you stand in front of the kiosk, we have trained our people that the instant you stop and do this, that we're right there by your side. That's high touch. We get over there and we say, hey, let's help you out. I see you're interested in the kiosk. Let's walk through an order. So we can teach you how to do this and make you more comfortable.
Yeah.
If we cut that labor that people are fearful of, we would never be able to do that. And you would turn and you'd walk.
Well, it's this debate of like, will AI in the learning profession, is that going to be used to cut jobs, or is it going to be used to augment the quality of work? And it sounds like, to your point, it's about like redistributing where the work happens.
Reallocating labor.
Kind of goes back to Maslow's hierarchy as well, right? Now,
got to have the people.
Exactly. You have the people, and now they're in a position where they can do the more compelling, interesting work that a robot will never be able to take on, because it is this, right? It's this. So franchisee owners, restaurant owners, people in leadership roles, there's a lot on their plate, tough macroeconomic times, staffing shortages, supply chain issues, run of the gamut. How do you help them navigate change? How do you equip those leaders with the skills they need to effectively manage change in their organizations and bring everyone along as we know we need to?
Well, I think it's having those hard conversations, right? You mentioned AI. AI is no different than we could probably go through 6 or 10 examples of new technologies that really scare people, right? That's true. The internet, smartphones, computers, like everything frightened everybody. They were always going to replace us.
Yeah.
Hasn't happened yet. Yeah. Not going to happen.
Right.
And I can tell you that AI will come and it will have an impact, but it will likely not be the impact we thought it was because we couldn't see it here. We never predicted what the smartphones would be able to do. We just thought they were a more compact way to have a phone, and look what they've become. Look, all of the things, you can't predict that. So technology is important, and what we have to do is have the hard conversations to say, listen, where do we incorporate technology into our restaurants to help us deliver a better guest experience? Look, restaurants are really simple on paper. They're just hard to run because they involve people. But to make money in a restaurant, there are only 2 ways you can do it. Get new people to come into the restaurant, new guests to come in and start ordering your food, or get the people that are already coming to come more often.
Right.
That's it. So all of that is balanced on how do I make sure that you walk away saying, that was really a good experience, or I'm craving that food, I'm going there to get it. So we need to concentrate on where can technology help us deliver that awesome hospitality experience. And so to bring people through change management, it's really thinking about what do we currently have in place and where do we desire to be and how do we get there? And let's make smart choices about the technology. Too often we see technology as, the silver bullet, right? That will solve all my ills. Yeah. Technology never solves all of your ills. Technology can help or hurt if you don't have sound people practices, if you don't have sound development practices. If you have those in place, technology can help. If you don't, all you're doing is accelerating getting to your demise faster. That's the way it works.
And how do you handle when the leader or even the employee is like, I just don't have time? 42% of folks say they just lack the time for training. More than about 38% say they don't have access to relevant training. How do you solve either one of those kind of variables in the equation?
I hear this all the time. Almost every stop I have been, I will encounter restaurant general managers that say, I'm so busy, I don't have time to train and develop people. I'm there 60 hours a week, and I stop and I say, okay, let's talk about that. The ideal restaurant general manager, right?
Yes, the ideal.
Doesn't even have to be in the restaurant, because if they have a strong leadership team, they could be out of the restaurant for an entire week, and that restaurant will never skip a beat, because they build a leadership team that actually does the activity and runs the restaurant. So if you're not in that situation, that's on you. You didn't develop the people. You didn't train the people. So people who say I don't have time for training are in that position because they are not training. Now, it could be that the organization doesn't have the systems, tools, processes in place to help them. Yeah. So it's not fair to hold someone accountable and say, I need you to develop people, but I don't have a development system for you. That happens all the time. Every stop I've been, not one organization I have been has had a career development, formal, replicable, repeatable, standardized career development system in place because they're hard to do. But we're holding them accountable for something we haven't provided them the tools to do. And that's simply not fair. Now, once we put that system in place, if you continue to decide to not use that system,
different conversation.
You probably shouldn't be with us.
Not only in quick service restaurants, like globally,
I've noticed it, yeah.
51% of HR folks are embarrassed of their own career frameworks. Like they know they don't work.
51%.
It's huge, right?
Yeah. Every organization I've been in has had talent assessments and has had a development process. But again, there's no framework. And people are often left saying, I don't know what I'm supposed to be working on, and I don't know how to get to the next level. It looks so random to me. So we're, at least in our restaurants, trying to eliminate that by saying we have a process from team member all the way up to DM. We're building that process so you can get where you want to get. And all you have to do is follow it.
How incredibly inspiring must it be, motivating for you to be able to follow that journey of like Shauna, who started here and has grown her career, probably had some stumbles along the way, made some new friends, made a ton of mistakes, and then now is able to lead her own restaurant, own her own franchise. And then because of that life experience and growing up in this system that's valued them and their skills and their behaviors, I guarantee that they're putting that back.
Yeah, they become a multiplier, right?
Yes.
So it just grows exponentially.
So one of the things we see on TV a lot is there's a lot more cooking on TV these days.
Oh my gosh, it's great, right? Food, hospitality.
Oh, it's amazing.
Think about it. Your favorite memories from 2 weeks ago, 2 years ago, 20 years ago, I bet involve 3 things. I ask this all the time. They involve the same 3 things for most everybody. Food, family, and fun. Your favorite memories will invariably go back to food and family and friends and fun. And the hospitality industry is that every day we get to have like a wedding party in a restaurant. Like, I mean, food, family, fun. Like, so, but sorry, so lots of food happening on TV, on the internet, lots of food.
Oh, one of my earliest core memories was in my godparents' restaurant where all those 3 things combined. So I hear you that it's so important, and it's such a...
Every milestone celebration in almost every culture has food.
Every culture around the world, right?
Yeah.
So we see a lot of these like personas on TV, and I'm curious. I know from experience it gets hot in the kitchen. There's a lot of pressure. You don't have control over like the influx of people, so your speed of service gets changed up around, and it can be discombobulating.
Yep, absolutely.
What's your view on feedback in these high pressure, somewhat high stress environments? Do you do it like a Gordon Ramsay, or is that just for TV, or like what actually works?
Wow, that's a great question. That's interesting, because we do see that Gordon Ramsay is very popular. A lot of people watch it. Yeah. He turns around restaurants, right? Yes. When I think about that, though, I put that in the category of reality TV, right? Gordon is entertaining people. I've never seen a successful restaurant where a feedback mechanism that berates people and makes them feel bad is successful. That works on TV. It's probably scripted. There's probably a couple other things injected in there that works for a short industry. But if you were to say, all right, we're going to adopt Gordon's philosophy, or we're going to keep Gordon in that restaurant for a year, and we're going to put the hidden cameras on, you're going to lose a lot of people because people aren't wired that way. What they want to know is, do you care about me? Will you help me get better? Nobody wakes up and walks in their job and says, I'm going to screw everything up and sabotage this. They don't at all, right? But under stress, you can make mistakes. And if you are there to help them and say, hey, first let's get through this, all right? And we'll pitch in and give you aid to get through the stressful part and through the busy hour. And then after, let's talk about what went wrong. Let's talk about where did it break down? And if it was you, that's okay. We'll give you the tools to succeed going better. So we just make a commitment to help them do it better going forward. So it doesn't mean you don't have to be positive every time. I mean, look, we all know that there is a successful way to deliver critical feedback, right, to help them improve. But from performance improvement, what we try to teach is a performance coaching model that I believe in that has a couple of ingredients. Number one, never stand or sit across from somebody when you're delivering feedback. All of our Western cultures, when we think about who's on my team and who's not on my team, where are your teammates?
Beside you.
Side to side, right? On a football line or on a soccer field, or they're beside me. Where are the people again? Where are the people who aren't my friends? Right. They're opposite me. They're against me. So anytime you align yourself opposite someone to deliver feedback, you already put yourself subconsciously in a place that's against them. Well, that's not where we want to be. So always stand or sit next to somebody. Number two, go find a physical representation of the problem that you want to tackle. Okay. Because as human beings, we hate being told what to do, and we hate being told we did something wrong, and we revert back to our 3-year-old selves and we say, no, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, I didn't.
Yeah.
Yes, you did. No, I didn't.
Yes.
Or if some people will say, yeah, okay, I did it. And as soon as you turn your back, they don't know what they're talking about. I don't do that. So find a physical representation. So maybe it's we're coaching them on speed of service. Let's go back to that one.
Okay.
Pull the speed of service report and put it down next to you, sitting next to someone, and say, let's look at this. What do you see?
So you're a fan of appreciative inquiry, it sounds like.
Absolutely. Because what I do is if we are directing our attention to that piece of paper, am I attacking you? Am I saying you did something wrong? Am I saying you're the problem? The problem's right in front of us. Let's figure this out. And then the reason that we are asking questions is back to, again, human psychology. You can never make somebody do something. They're the only ones that can change their behavior. So if you ask questions over and over, you got them when they say, oh, I never thought of that.
Yeah.
Or, oh, I didn't know that. And then when they realize it, they'll change their behavior.
Yeah.
And if they don't, that's okay. You can eventually move them out because there's a process. But at no time did I say, you made a mistake, or you were wrong, or you're bad, or you're not. So that's totally opposite of a Gordon Ramsay approach, which it just isn't sustainable. It's good for entertainment, but it's not sustainable.
It is true that an organization who has these systems, the way that you know the system is working is when the person with the right behaviors is moving through the system in a positive way. But you also have the right guardrails in place where the person who is making a choice, because they don't want to opt into the behaviors that are acceptable, that they are exited out of the business.
Right.
And there's a part of that is the business driving it, but there's also a self-awareness of like, this doesn't align with how I want to spend my time and how I want to show up. And you can self-select out of those situations.
Yes.
But if you don't know the rules and you don't know the expectations, that doesn't really happen.
Absolutely. And notice the things we're talking about. They take time, repetition, they're not easy. We live in a world that is immediate gratification. So it's easier to point to a KPI and yell at someone than it is to spend the time over and over. So when you have people say, I don't have time for training, this is what they're talking about. It's not easy. It's hard. But to get where you want to go, you have to do those things. You have to build talent. We're in a world now of instant gratification where I know if I've had interaction with you that I don't like, I kind of give up on you as a leader. Like it's hard to build talent, but it's the best way to do it. You just have to put the time and the effort and follow the system. And too often there isn't a system.
Yeah.
So what happens is you spend all that time, but it's unstructured and there's no advancement. So that's the dilemma that we're in.
Data shows us so clearly that you can fundamentally change retention with a high quality onboarding program. It's
Absolutely.
miraculous.
Absolutely.
Do you find that is
Oh,
true?
absolutely. Absolutely. Onboarding is one of the most important things that you can do. And in various organizations, we've helped build and rebuild that onboarding program. And we take as our point of departure Dan Pink's book on Drive, all about motivation, right? So Dan Pink asserts that happiness and satisfaction in any job isn't driven by monetary rewards, isn't driven by a title. It's driven by 3 things and in a specific order. He says that his research has showed him that satisfaction in a role is driven by mastery, autonomy, and purpose. So it goes back to our human selves, our 3-year-old selves. We don't like being told what to do. So if I'm given the skills to master a position at a restaurant or even a high-level leadership job, if I'm given the proper onboarding to master the role, then I have autonomy and people are telling me what to do, and then I have purpose because I'm part of the team driving the organization. So our principle is let's focus on when we onboard someone on, stop trying to make them do all the positions at once. Let's focus on one, and let's even segment that, right? So we've had to map out an onboarding process that says, look, in many organizations, preparing the sandwiches is very complex, right? Sandwich builds are tough.
Okay.
So you can't just throw someone on a sandwich station and say, okay, learn all the builds and look up there, and when you see them, build them. But that happens a lot, right? So we actually build an onboarding process that I stole from IT, and we call it a minimum viable contributor. It's got a minimum viable product.
Yeah.
So a minimum viable contributor, we put you out into a position, and let's say it's sandwiches. We say, look, your job today on your first shift is just toast the buns. Just toast the buns and deliver those over to the person making the sandwiches. Simply by standing there, you're going to learn by osmosis. But you're only responsible for this tiny little part. And so you're going to feel good about that because it's going to be hard to mess that up. And you're just going to feel, because I'm contributing all these sandwiches. And then as the shift goes down and isn't as busy, that's where a really good training buddy or ace can say, okay, now you saw me. Now it's kind of slow around here, so why don't you do the next build? You slide over here. and you coach them through a single build. Well, if you do that across time, they master the skills without the stress, without being blamed, without being told they did a terrible job. They learn bit by bit, and they end up mastering that role, and then they have the autonomy and they feel great about it. So if you can actually think about and build from the team members' journey, learning journey, if you can build an experience that allows them to dip their toe in to any role and have again, we're back to narrowing the circle zero, right? That just do this really well. When you do this really well, we'll give you more. And pretty soon they're flying on their own and they're awesome.
Well, and that's such a big part of that culture element that we've talked about.
Yes.
So I want to talk a bit about the misconception cliche that fast food jobs are dead-end jobs. You've talked a lot about how that is not the case, right? How we are changing employees' socioeconomic status sometimes, structured career path in a fast food environment. I will say outside of quick service restaurants, companies don't always have this stuff together. So it's a lot of like similar challenges with broken career systems that exist. But I'm curious about your experience about helping many employees in these systems. And if you're joining a new QSR organization and there is no system in place, what's one thing that you can do to move you guys in the right direction, move your teams in the right direction?
Well, I think at every stop along the way, different organizations and learning development functions have done some things well and some things not so well. But what I always talk about is we need to focus on building internal and external systems and tools and processes. Okay. So as a function, so one of the funniest interactions I had was I arrived at one of my organizations, took over the learning and development team, and they said what many people will this will resonate with many people who are watching. They don't know what we do. They come in and they say, I need training and I need it in 2 weeks and it's all this and we need it now, and they just don't understand what we do. So I said, well, have you ever told them what you do? And they said, well, no. And I go, well, then how would they know what you do? Yeah. And do you know what you do? And they said, well, wait a minute, what? He said, yeah, we build training. I go, yeah, but how many steps does it take? How are you going to tell that person what to expect in terms of delivery if you don't know? Is it 10 steps? Is it 210 steps? Because if it's 210 steps and you tell someone, okay, yeah, we'd love to do that for you. Here's 210 steps and they each take this, they'll go, okay. But if you say it's 10 steps and it's going to take us 6 months, to look at you and go, well, how is that possible? So if you don't know what you do, you need to build the internal systems, tools, processes to be able to tell someone what you do and for your own intake, right? Yes. And so then once you build those, you also have to build the external systems, tools, processes.
I want to pause on the internal for a second, because I think this is really important for our audiences, because the idea of how do you operationalize learning, how do you go from an order taker to a strategic player, one we both know is really important. And what you're saying is that if you don't have clarity on the processes and methodologies and really how you come up with the interventions you do, you are going to have a hard time.
You're going to be on the training treadmill.
You're going to be on the training treadmill.
You're just going to be reacting. You're going to be throwing out training and you might be proud. It might look great. It might even deliver some results, but it's not going to be strategic because it doesn't have those internal systems, tools, processes, and it doesn't have the external systems.
You're also not re-educating your stakeholders, right? You're building a behavior in that whoever the training requester is, a leader, whoever, to say, you'll build me 5 e-learning modules and 2 quizzes if I asked you, versus the practice and the habit of getting to the root cause of the problem through 5 whys, appreciative inquiry, HPI, whatever methodology you use. Yeah. Now, you've talked about action mapping as like a goodie for the audience to go home with. Any other goodies that you like? You mentioned
I would say playing off. It's interesting. You used the word methodology. Methodology scares people. So I use it, but then I always back off and say it's just a recipe. Just think of it as a recipe. It's how you do things, right? Methodology seems scary, but all it means is what's your recipe that you do over and over again to get the same result. So when you back it down and say it's just a recipe. So I think if you are aspiring to advance your career in learning and development, or you lead an organization, 2 really important things, very important things. Yeah. Understand what's your learning and development philosophy and what's your methodology. And it will vary by person. Some will be similar. There'll be a lot of elements that are important, but there is no one philosophy and there is no one methodology recipe. If you think about sports again, many teams play different offenses. Happens in soccer, happens in football. It doesn't mean they're wrong. It means they're different. And the coach has a philosophy of how to go about scoring points and winning games. So you need to spend the time. So I have a philosophy that has 4 pillars. I have a methodology that has 4 pillars, and it's taken 30 years to build it. But when I go into new organizations, I sit down and say, listen, this is Jay-Z's philosophy and methodology. And because I happen to be leading the organization. We're all going to follow it. But it doesn't mean it should be yours. You can learn from it, but you should be developing your own. And we have far too many L&D professionals who have never taken the time to say, what's my philosophy? My philosophy, and philosophy is, again, just a fancy word for how does L&D work?
Yeah.
Right? How do human beings, right? What do you believe in? So have a philosophy and have a methodology. And,
Can you tell
will
us
be
your philosophy and methodology?
Oh my gosh, it would take another 4 to 6 hours to go through that. Also, listen, a philosophy or a methodology isn't static. It evolves and it changes because we learn. We constantly learn new tools, new ways. But it does. The philosophy doesn't change as often as the methodology. Methodology doesn't change as often as the tools. So a methodology is really, again, the idea of a recipe. What do you do, no matter whether the intervention is something as small as we're going to introduce barcodes on coupons or we're going to roll out a major software. Those are on kind of opposite ends of the complexity spectrum.
Right.
Your methodology doesn't change. So from the coupon perspective, I absolutely remember being in an organization where the marketing had a regular meeting with the leader of the marketing team. He said, hey, Jay-Z, forgot to tell you last meeting, but by the way, we're putting barcodes on all of our coupons. And I said, we need to train that. And he said, oh, it's easy. They're just on there. Yeah. And he said, and I said, when? And they said, next week. And I go, like, we have a method, we have a recipe. To do this. And he said, oh, Jay-Z, don't worry about it. It's easy. All they do is have to go boop, and it's done.
And that was the training.
So I said, fine. So we had our meeting a month later, and I said, oh, well, hey, by the way, how's the coupon barcoding going? And he said, I don't understand what, and he caught himself. He said, you told me this was going to happen. And he said, they aren't doing it. And I go, they're not doing it because you didn't follow our recipe. I said, our recipe is tell them what's coming, make sure they know, give them the training deliverables, make sure the supervisor knows what they're supposed to do, and then measure that. So he said, well, they just keep keying it in the old way. I go, yeah, they're keying it all the way because you didn't follow the recipe that gave them opportunities to practice and go boop. And even though it's supposed to be boop and it's that easy, I didn't say, listen, marketing person, I didn't say that our recipe would take a full year to develop the program to do the booping. Yeah. I simply said it has to have the same components. And if we follow the same components, we could have delivered an intervention that would have had him exactly where he wanted on his KPI, which was booping all the coupons.
Booping all the coupons.
Yeah.
I mean, and the reality is that slowing down to speed up. To your point, you were able to have that conversation because you have a well-defined series of recipes and philosophy that people can rely on. And I want to ask you about 2 recipes.
Okay.
43% of frontline managers say they lack the training that they need and it's impacting their day-to-day operations. What recipe could they come to you for?
Well, it depends. We would dig a little further in to see what it is that they're lacking, right? And again, the recipe is the same. What we're going to figure out is what is it you're missing to be able to do your job effectively? Are you missing how to coach a team member? Are you missing an understanding of an important system? Are you missing a new technology? What is it? A leadership skill. Once we know what, and we'll talk to you and say, talk us through it. And it might be multiple, right? Yeah. It might be multifaceted. So we're going to carve it up and we're going to apply the same process. And we're going to say, okay, let's talk about in 6 months, how will you know you're successful? Well, I'll do this better. Okay, how are we going to measure that? All right, we're going to set up. And the other thing is, notice how often, the last part of my recipe, by the way, is reporting and data, right? Kirkpatrick's works, right? Level 1, 2, 3, 4. Problem is, you know how we do interventions? We do the intervention, and then when do we start the reporting? When someone says, hey, how's that going? And I tell my team, that's terrible. Why are we always in an ad hoc position? We know what we're going to train. I want the reporting framework set up before we even launch it. Like I want to be able to tell them, you're going to get this report this often. You're going to get this report. This is what you're going to look for. When this happens, we're going to go to this. Set the reporting up ahead of time. Yeah. So we would be able to say, okay, so this is how you're defining success. Okay, we're going to measure it across this amount of time. Now we're going to design the behaviors. Like we're going to know what behaviors you need, what practice do you need, what information, and we're going to design it the same way. And we're going to work with you to be able to change your behavior and get that skill. And again, we distill everything. This is part of my philosophy. I'm a behaviorist because I'm a political scientist. So I don't believe you've learned anything until you actually do the behavior. 100, 100, 100, which I stole from pals. 100% of the time, 100% accuracy at 100% speed. That's what we aspire to. That's when you know somebody knows it, right? Yeah. So we say, okay, we distill all learning down to an observable behavior checklist. Could be 8, could be 10, but we know what does it look like when you're doing the leadership correctly? What does it look like when you delegate correctly? What does it look like when you run a great shift as a coach and cheerleader? Well, I can tell you what it looks like. I'm going to grab a cup of coffee and I'm going to sit there and I'm going to make sure that you greet 100% of your team members by looking them in the eye, smiling, and saying something that has nothing to do with work. Now, you might do that for 2 of them out of 10 that come in. Are you 100, 100, 100? No. So you haven't mastered that skill, have you? So we just keep coaching you until you say, listen, it's essential that every time one of your team members walks through the door, you stop what you're doing, you acknowledge them as a person, and you thank them for coming, and you ask them something outside of work so that they know that you care about them. And when they do that habitually, we can certify you. Might take 2 weeks, might take 2 months, might take 2 years, but we also look and say, eventually, if we're still here 2 years later, you're not a shift leader, and we've got to talk about something else, right?
Right, but the fact that the repetition, the spacing, the observable behavior, the like good old-fashioned tell, show, do, review model, like try, test it, and true. And frankly, in some corporate environments, we could learn a few things about how to bring this level of...
It's hard work, though. We truncate it, and then it takes time to develop people.
Yeah.
And it's usually the last thing we do because we're trying to run the business, and it's a big mistake.
Yeah, it's interesting how we think about talent as like a tax versus actually the fuel that is going to drive your business for a team to be able to like make the maximum impact. Do you say that they have to be a bit more reactive and listen to what the business is saying, or would you say that it's more of a proactive exercise?
That's a good question. I tend to drive my L&D functions far more on the proactive. Like we're already looking at 2025 strategic planning. Cool. We're working hand in hand with leadership on 25 through 28 strategic planning. So if I know where again, my job is to support the business and to be able to train people to drive what the business wants. So I have to know where the business is going. And once I know where the business is going, it percolates down through my team. So I have 3 towers on my team: restaurant ops training, franchise excellence, field training. We translate that strategy to say, what are the initiatives you're going to do next year that will drive? We follow the same process. Imagine that. Yeah. Here's the KPI. What are the behaviors we have to do to drive the KPI? We build and think about initiatives to be able to drive the strategic indicators. So we're far more proactive. There are times we have to be reactive because we are one group, and sometimes environmental conditions change that force you to have to perform in a reactive mode, but that needs to be the exception. If it stays the exception, it's good. If the exception becomes the rule, and all you're doing is reacting, then you can never be strategic.
And you talked a little bit about data, so I'm curious if you have any advice or best practices. I've heard you already say that you need to start by knowing what the KPI you're driving is. Secondly, I've heard you say that you need to have an always-on system so you can pull the right data and you're not rebuilding it as an event every time you're building a new training. Any other advice as it relates to getting the right insight from data?
I think data science continues to evolve, and it's really important. One of the first hires that we made in my current organization was I specifically got a box for a data analyst. I needed to know if we train X, and this was what we said we would drive, are we actually driving it? We have a dedicated person that just runs data analysis on all the things that we do. But remember, there's a lot of data out there. Yeah. Data is just data. And too often, we dump data at people in the form of spreadsheets and reports. Dumping data at somebody is like throwing all the raw ingredients at someone and saying, here, make it. Our job with data is to create the visualizations of the data that allow them to take actions. And that's harder to do, but you have to do it. What they really want to know is just show me that if X here, what's Y? What am I supposed to go do? So design your reporting strategies and your data to display. It should be very clear just by looking, I got to go do X, Y, or Z.
Right, because imagine you get a report as a leader and you're like, we trained 837 people over 4 weeks. Yeah. What does that mean? Yeah. Right? And being able to say, as a result, there's now 10% less overages. Safety has increased X, Y, or Z. Like that is the stuff that will help drive going back to behaviors, right? That is the thing that matters. So I got another question for you, and this is one of my personal favorites. Is learning an art or a science?
Both.
Tell me more.
It's both. There's a science of human, it's like anything. There's parts of each, right? So there is science of how people learn, how they learn through repeated interaction with data, through spacing it, interleaving, all those concepts that cognitive science and positive psychology have discovered in the last 30, 40, 50 years, and we continue to discover more. There is science that tells us how people learn. The art is, how do you take the science and put it into a system that helps people be engaged, enjoy, and then actually achieve what they want? So if you don't have the art to the science, it's just brute, hey, I know you learn this way, go do this, right? No, the art is design a beautiful system that allows people to be immersed and they don't even know it. It's like the fish in water. They don't even know they're immersed, and yet they're growing and achieving. That's our job. Our job as learning and development specialists is to understand the science, to bring the art to create a beautiful system.
What do you think is the biggest curveball that L&D practitioners can expect to face?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think we're still in the middle of a very rapid evolution around how the internet and smartphones and access to vast amounts of data, unstructured data, at your fingertips has impacted the way people learn. So we're still doing the research on attention spans and learning and interaction, and we don't know where we are yet, but we know that something happened, right? We know that newspaper reading, radios, movies, like look at the data on movies, and again, back to the science, we know that the frame rate change of a movie 50 years ago is completely different than one now. It's so much more rapid now because we are rapid intake. So we're changing somehow, but we don't know what it is, and we don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so the perception of how people are processing information, and it's not an age-related thing, but it tends to skew for ages, because the younger people tend to be on their devices more. Some older people are too, so it's not really age-related, but it tends to skew. But what's interesting is we don't know how to deal with the perceptions of those types of tools in a restaurant. For example, if you see a person in a restaurant grab a phone and take a look at it, and you're a guest, oftentimes the guest says, well, this is BS. I'm standing here and they're screwing around on the phone. How do you know? How do you know that a key food service, a food safety alert didn't come in that they have to look at that could save that guest from getting ill? But the perception is, oh, you're screwing around on your phone. So we have to figure out how those perceptions are going to change and how to leverage those tools in a way that still helps people learn. So if we know attention spans may not be as long as they have been in the past, or rate change, people respond to faster information, then we have to be cognizant of it, and we have to use it in our design, but we don't give up on the end result. The end result is, I'm trying to get you to change your behavior.
Right.
So take advantage of what we know is happening to be able to leverage those tools. So it's a curveball, because you often hear people say a couple of things, especially in QSR, that I don't understand these young people anymore. They don't have the same work ethic. But they were saying that in the 50s to the people. It happens all.
Yes.
Not true, but what's changed is the world has become such a smaller place. And what the world was 50 years ago, before the internet, that information took a long time to travel. There's now so much of it, and it's so fast. So we have to help people build the skill to still be able to see data, see information, act against it in a way that helps them do their job better and run a business. That's it. And we're in the middle of it. That's a huge curveball. Like, we don't know what's going to come out on the other end.
No, and I'm thinking about one of the things that's been a theme throughout our conversation, which is the way that you stack the Lego blocks of an intervention, like the different things that you do, all result in the same behavior. So you're right. Yeah. The jury's out on the impact of changing attention spans, the influx of new types of technology. I think in the post-pandemic era, they're craving the human connection. They want stackable, blended learning experiences. Yeah. But you're all still driving in the same behavior. Yeah. And so I think, to our question around art and science, there is going to need to be some experimenting, and that's going to take a little bit of artistry. It's going to take creativity, being imaginative. And
I think I agree with you. And I think the other thing is we have to carve away the myths, right? Okay. Let's think about people that say, well, young people don't have attention spans anymore. They're jumping all over the place. I don't know. I've seen plenty of young people that will engage in online gaming for hours at a time, and all their attention is right there. Okay. So It's not an attention thing. It's a how are we designing our things to engage people where they're at and to make sure that we can still drive the same behaviors. So.
Well, it goes back to something we started our conversation with, which is the shared experience we both have of not going to school the first round for this.
Yeah.
Right? And so think about all of those new practitioners that are building these skills. Now, there's a question around, is what they're learning in school preparing them for the future of the learning ecosystem today or, 20 years ago? But there is going to be a new crop of individuals that are growing up in this craft.
Yes.
And so I think if they tap into the resources, the books, the leaders that they're working with, and really, like Miss Frizzle from Magic School Bus says, just make mistakes and get messy and try things. Yeah. We will progressively be able to conquer this new challenge.
Absolutely.
Okay, I have one more question for you. Are you ready?
I am.
All right, this is a bit of a funky one, and I'm curious what your opinion is because you've been around.
I better get ready.
Yeah, you better get ready. You better get ready, Jay-Z. Okay, 3 questions. First one, these are all prediction-based. So get out your mystical foresight.
I would say my magic 8 ball, but half the young people wouldn't get that reference.
No, I was going to say we get the reference, like I'm a part of that group. But it's okay, yes. Get out your magic 8 ball. Let's shake it up and find out your 3 predictions. So one of them, I want you to be 90% sure that this is going to happen. The second prediction, 50% sure. And the third prediction is something you're just 10% sure will happen. Shake that magic 8 ball, Jay-Z.
I am 90% sure AI will have an impact on learning and development in the coming years.
Okay.
Hands down, it's going to have an impact.
Yeah.
I'm 50% sure that what we now think the impact of AI will actually happen. And I'm 10% sure of what that outcome actually will be because I know it will have an impact and I know we think that we understand what it will. Yeah. But I can pretty much guarantee you if it follows the trajectory of any other technology, what we thought it was designed for and what we thought it would do will be only the smallest sliver when we move down that road. Same with the internet, same with smartphones, same with radio, same with film and television. Everything we thought it would be. I mean, go back and think about the first shows on TV were people standing around a microphone because that's what you did for radio. And it took a while for people to understand the power of what the next technology would be, and then it took off. And we can predict that that technology will have an impact. What we cannot predict is where that technology will take us and where it'll end up. It happens with every technology.
I think I appreciate that perspective. It's a little Skynet and scary, but I'm going to be a positive optimist. And I mean, we're in an environment where because of the proliferation of technology, you're going to have people who have access to knowledge that they would never have before.
Absolutely.
And that's going to have a flywheel effect and generate more people that have access to new information. And so it looks like it's going to be a bright world.
Oh, absolutely.
I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, Jay-Z.
Thanks for inviting me in.
It's fascinating.
It's been a wonderful discussion.
I think that our audience has so much to learn from you, and it's really cool to watch somebody be able to build this superpower of all of these different methodologies, like you like to call them recipes, that they can pull out and support the various businesses that you have. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.